Intro to CSS for Lightning Web Components. The part that decides whether your working component actually looks like something a user would want to touch. Here's the big idea. HTML gives your component structure, a div, a button, a list. CSS decides how that structure actually looks: spacing, color, alignment, size, layout. A component with perfect JavaScript and no CSS attention still reads as unfinished, because visual hierarchy is doing half the communication work whether you planned for it or not. In an LWC, CSS lives in its own file, right alongside the JavaScript and HTML, myComponent.js, myComponent.html, myComponent.css, same folder, same name. You don't import it, you don't link it. The platform wires it up automatically the moment the file exists. Basic CSS syntax: if you need the refresher, a selector, then curly braces, then property value pairs ending in semicolons. Selector says what to style. Declarations say how. The three selector types you'll use constantly. Element selectors target a tag directly, button styles, every button. Class selectors use a dot and target anything with that class. Reusable, specific, the one you'll use most. ID selectors use a hash and target one exact element. Rare in LWC, mostly avoided. Here's a selector example against a template with a card, a heading inside it, and a highlighted paragraph using a class. Specificity is the part that actually breaks people's styles. When two rules target the same element, the more specific selector wins, not the one written last. This is why a class rule can lose to an ID rule even if the class rule appears further down the file. The specificity hierarchy, low to high. Element selectors, then class selectors, then ID selectors, then inline styles, with important overriding everything else regardless of specificity. Avoid, important, it's a shortcut that makes future debugging much harder. Here's a specificity example. 3 rules targeting the same paragraph, and which one actually wins based on selector weight, not file order. Flexbox, the big idea. Use setDisplay. Flex on a parent container, and every direct child inside it becomes a flex item that the parent can align, space, and reorder, without floats, without manual positioning. A basic flex row, a container with display, flex, and however many child divs. They line up horizontally by default, no extra code needed. 3 flexbox properties you'll reach for constantly. Justify content controls horizontal spacing, space between, center, flex end. Align items controls vertical alignment within the row. Center is the one you'll use most. Flex direction flips the axis, row by default, column when you want a vertical stack. Real pattern, a 2-column layout using flexbox, a label on the left, a value on the right, justify content. Space between doing all the work, no absolute positioning required. Salesforce ships SLDS, the Salesforce Lightning design system, with hundreds of pre-built utility classes for spacing, grids, typography, and buttons. SLDS m_medium adds margin. SLDS grid turns on flex layout. SLDS p_small adds padding. These exist so components across the whole platform look consistent without everyone reinventing the same CSS. Here's an SLDS utility example. A grid wrapper with spacing classes, 0 custom CSS required for this specific layout. So when do you write custom CSS instead of reaching for SLDS? Use SLDS first, always, for spacing, grids, standard buttons, standard text styles. Write custom CSS for anything SLDS genuinely doesn't cover. A specific brand color, a custom animation, a layout SLDS's grid system can't produce cleanly. Now the part that's specific to LWC and trips up developers coming from plain web development, shadow DOM. Every LWC template renders inside a shadow root, which means CSS written inside one component's file cannot style elements inside a child component, and CSS from outside cannot reach into your component either. Practical implication, a generic selector like div or p in your component's CSS only ever touches the div and p elements inside that specific component's own template, never inside any child component it renders. Use the host selector to style the component's own root element from the inside, since host specifically targets the custom element boundary. A few layout patterns you'll rebuild constantly: a card, padding, border radius, a subtle box shadow. A 2-column form row, flexbox with space between. A vertical list of rows, flex direction, column with a border bottom on each item instead of a full grid. Recognize these shapes, and you'll write less CSS from scratch every time. CSS decides whether your working component looks finished or looks like a first draft. Selectors, specificity, flexbox, SLDS first, shadow DOM scoping. That's the whole intro. Full written breakdown, with every code example, is on realsyllabus.com.